some of the attributes? How can you then, how do you make sure that that becomes part of your identity? Then I'm going to share with you a partnership cycle, which is similar to the project cycle, but in partnerships, you need not just the project cycle, but the partnership cycle so that you pay attention to your partnership. And then I'm going to provide you with a partnership compass that will be a bit of a touchstone for you as you're working through your partnerships. So let's dive into that first section, which is really looking at how we define partnerships. Because the word partnership has become almost like a bit of a cliche. Everybody is a partner. And it's often used to describe what I would call many really just transactional relationships that really are not partnerships. And we need to really be more intentional about that word so that we can then again be more intentional about the kind of value we're getting. And a lot of organizations, if they get some resources from a foundation or a corporation and they're given a check, they call them partners. But we really look at the word partnership as something where it's an ongoing working relationship where you're really sharing the risks and sharing the rewards. So that when you've got that word risk, are those funders sharing the risks? Or are they interested in the rewards? Or even with other organizations you might be working with who are providing some support, but it might not be a really genuine partnership where you're really trying to meaningfully collaborate to advance a shared goal. So this is a very dictionary-oriented definition and really doesn't give you the true meaning of a genuine partnership. So we share what we see as key attributes to be thinking about as you're thinking about your partnership. And it's so important to be able to think about that you stop and you spend time defining what you mean with your partnerships, with your partners. What do we mean when we say partnership? And I know when I teach this longer, we have a 4-day course, we have a 5-day course. It's the first thing I ask people, and I have so many people say, I've never had that conversation with my partners. We haven't actually stopped and talked about what we mean by the word partnership. And are you truly willing to share risks and share rewards? Then secondly, of course, you're going to have a shared purpose. That a common goal that you're coming together around where both of you care about advancing that shared goal. But for a partnership to be successful, your partners need to also have their interests, their goals understood. Because partnerships need to be win-win. You need to be winning for the partnership. Individual organizations need to be getting something out of it. The community needs to be getting something out of it. And often I have people say to me, oh, my partner isn't showing up to the meetings. And my first question is, are they getting out of it what they need to get out of it in addition to the shared purpose? And so often people think, well, you know, we don't want them to get something out of it. And yet there's got to be, you know, justifiable or interests, partner interests that really are aligned with the shared goal, but that you are slightly different than what other partners might want to get out of it. So stopping and spending time understanding what each of you needs to get out of it in addition to the shared goal and what constraints your partners might have. Secondly, really taking the time to co-create your plan and what you're going to do together. So often I've seen partners come and they say, this is what we're going to do. Do you want to partner with us? And it's not really being co-created. A partnership is about coming together. And you might have some ideas. There's always often a initiating partner who said, this is what we want to try to achieve and we see you as supporting that. But then you take the time to sit down and plan together and really then take that co-creation and then jointly develop a joint decision making and shared leadership So it's not being driven by one partner. It's really jointly decided upon. And that everybody is coming to the table and contributing resources. And we look in a lot more detail about what that means. And resources are not just money. So often, especially in the nonprofit sector, we think, well, we don't have anything to contribute. Your funders are contributing the money. But yet we come with, in the nonprofit sector, knowledge, connections, credibility that other organizations need if they're going to solve those big goals that you're coming together around. And then that you really commit to mutually accountability, shared accountability. You're going to be accountable to each other, accountable to your funders together, and that you're going to really do that in genuine partnership. And then taking a values-based approach. We'll talk a bit more about that, and paying attention to the relationships, to the partnership, not just the project. So this is these attributes, and I'm sure there's others that you can think about. I'm just doing some work with a national organization where they've come up with some other attributes that they really are interested in. So what I want to do is just take a moment and ask people in the audience, how many of you have taken the time to define the word, what you mean by partnership, and what are going to be the attributes that are going to be important for you when you're working in partnership. So just to share a couple of other ones: humility, not brand. In other words, we're going to have collective leadership. This is about the big idea, not about individual organizations. We're going to focus on the larger system, not just our own organizational needs.
Jocelyne, while we're waiting for the poll
Yes.
to come in, I do have one question, and I think you're kind of answering it, but I think it's important to say,
Right.
in not-for-profit, most of my partners, or Sandra says, in not-for-profit, most of my partnerships are informal.
Yeah.
Do you think we should move to more structured partnerships, put it to paper?
I think it depends on what works for you. If you want to, we always talk about it has to be fit for purpose. So it depends on what you're doing. But my experience is that, putting pen to paper clarifies a lot of, who's doing what, roles and responsibilities, clarity around what is that shared purpose. I mean, I did a big partnership review about a year and a half ago for participation, and it was an $8 million partnership, and they hadn't actually written down their common goal. So, putting pen to paper just can clarify and make sure people understand what it is you're actually doing, who's doing what, how decisions are going to be made, how you're going to move forward, what are the activities. So I think there is value in that, because I think it just helps to clarify, and it also could help you deepen the partnership impact and the results. And, here we see that most organizations, and this is my experience, is that many organizations say, let's partner, but then don't stop and take the time to say, well, what do we actually mean by that? And so I'm hoping on Monday, this might be one thing that you can do, is even within your own organization. And I always start with your own, you yourself. What do you mean when you think of the word partnership? And then have a discussion with your organization. What do we want when we partner? What kind of partner are we going to be? Are we going to show up in this genuine way where we're going to share control, where we're going to share joint accountability, where we're going to share decision making? Are you prepared to do that? And then you can even talk. Then the third step is to talk to your partners. So if you think about it from sequencing, you yourself, because if you are not clear on what you mean by partnering, then how can your organization be clear? And if your organization isn't clear, how can your partnerships be clear? So such an important, valuable thing. And when I look that not yet, but we need to, it does demonstrate people see the value of taking the time to think about that. So thanks for that question, Leslie. And we'll get into that in a little bit more detail when I go to the next slide. Because one of the things that I think is really important to understand or think about is that there isn't a one-size-fits-all partnerships. There's different types of partnerships. And often we call everything a partnership. So taking the time to say, okay, well, this is actually a program or a service partnership, where it's often a couple of like organizations coming together to share program support. You're working within the existing status quo, but you're going to leverage each other's resources so that you can deliver programs and services to more people, that you can, cover off. I'm on the board of the Calgary Counseling Center. We have a partnership with the Distress Center, so people can phone the Distress Center number if they can't reach us during the off hours. So those are really important. And those relationships are often where you start to build trust. Then you can start looking at possible ways that you can then look at those kind of bigger partnerships, those more integrated ecosystems where you're looking across a system. So an example of this is a partnership I was involved helping to support here in Calgary around early math literacy, where we were looking, how do we help kids get better at math? How do we help teachers? And we put together a partnership that included the University of Calgary Faculty of Education, the separate school board, the public school board, a nonprofit based out of Toronto, Jump Math, the Calgary Public Library, the Boys and Girls Clubs. So we were working across, not just in a narrow, but we were trying to say, how do we look at the spectrum of who's involved in helping kids get better at math? So of course it starts with how the teachers at the University of Calgary, when they're in the Faculty of Education, are being taught how to do it. And then even in-service teachers, what do we need to do to help them? And it's been an amazing partnership in terms of what it's done. And then how do we provide support to those kids who are high needs in places like the Boys and Girls Clubs, in the public library? So we looked across. And we also had, our funder actually was a partner. So we worked across the nonprofit sector, the academic sector, the governance sector, the corporate sector. So much more complex, but there was that common goal that really was the glue. And even when things got tough, and I can tell you, the only thing that you know about a partnership is there will be difficult times, because you are on a hero's journey when you partner. You have to have the strength for two, and you have to accept that there's going to be challenges, and you got to face them head on. And I always say, wear those challenges as badges of honor. That's how you're not going on a partnership where you're going to meet lions. You're going to meet dragons, and you're going to have to slay them. So what do you learn? How do you build a partnership that is not fragile? It's not even resilient, it's anti-fragile, where when you have problems, you actually get better. I mean, we're talking a lot about building back better coming from out of our pandemic. Same with our partnerships when we face challenges. So these more ecosystem ones are deeper. They often are longer term. A program partnership is something that you can jump in pretty quickly and get started. Those more integrated system partnerships can take longer to form, longer to see the results, but the impact can certainly be bigger. And then eventually to make transformational system change partnerships where you've learned so much from working together, from working across the system, that you actually can start to say, like with our math partnership, how do we show the math program from what we've learned to the Department of Education in Alberta, so that they can take some of those learnings and integrate that into the work that they do across the whole province. But I always say to people, this is not a good, better, best. You have to decide what's fit for purpose. What do we really need to do? And then how do we use that and to even at some point become more ambitious? How do we say we move from those program partnerships where we've built great relationships? Could we do something bigger? Could we think differently? Could we try something new? So these are really important to think about. And I'll just pause for a moment and see if there's anything in the chat box or any questions that have come out of that.
Jocelyne, it's Leslie here. I have 2 questions. I'll start with the one from Jenna. She says, how would you recommend maintaining and encouraging accountability when your organization is mostly run by volunteers?
Yeah. Well, I think that is where you do have a written agreement, a written plan, check-in accountabilities, where you've got clarity around roles and responsibilities, where you have someone who is really kind of leading it. We're not going to get in today the idea of having somebody who kind of leads a partnership. We'll look at that at another time perhaps. But you know, having someone like a project manager, but a partnership manager to make sure people are following up, calling the meetings. So that's where having things in writing can be so important, and where you're co-creating, so that right out of the gate, you've got this kind of mutual agreement. You've created it together. So that is a good starting point. And then one of the other things that I always say is that you've got to have results. Partnership is not just about getting together to dialogue, because if you don't have some early wins and some results where you're seeing the value, the whole thing will fall apart. So actually in your planning, thinking, what are some early wins that we can work towards? And then how do we help each other be accountable so that we can see the results and the value of doing this?
Excellent, thank you. I noticed that early on there was a question defining transformational partnership, that the term wasn't clear. And then could you give a specific example? And then further, how do we find such partners?
Yes, well, I always say transformational partnerships are not something where you start. That's often where you're working towards. So a transformational partnership is where you're really designing new policies and practices that really change the way organizations work. So I mentioned this example of this math partnership, which was called Math Minds. And the goal was really to take a look at what are the ways that we can help teachers because it was focused on grade 1 to grade 6. We needed to focus our efforts. And if kids get out of grade 6 and they're not confident in math, they really struggle. So those early years are so important. And who's the most important in terms of helping kids be successful? Teachers. So what do we need to do to help teachers? What are the things that teachers really need to understand to be able to effectively teach math well and help kids really do well? So we did 6 years of research, working in the classroom, working with groups, huge learning, sharing that learning, integrating it into the way math was being taught in the Faculty of Education at the University of Calgary, creating in the 6th year a master's program on early math teaching that then gave teachers a chance who were already in the class to get a credit towards a master's degree by learning some of the techniques and the ways in which we discovered the important sort of leverage points and points where teachers really needed to make sure that kids understood certain concepts. And so really the ultimate goal is now to get that adopted as the way math is taught, so that it's no longer a program, it's actually now the way math is taught in the schools. So that's an example. And another example would be, another partnership that I just did a review of, where it was a group of organizations where they put together a community hub. They worked collaboratively to try to offer services, sort of one-stop shopping services in a neighborhood. And so that was a conscious, integrated approach to, making it easier for the client, being client-focused. How does that just become the way we work all the time? How does this go from just having to be intentionally creating it to thinking, instead of, like say a community organization, with a community center, for example, or a recreation center, how do you make that they just automatically think, let's make sure that we've got, not recreation, but we build in a library there, or we build in social services, and it becomes like a hub for the community to get access to all sorts of services that are across the system. So does that explain it? And I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to keep going. And I'm just going to briefly mention, partnerships are part art and they're part science. And the art side is really about the values, how you're going to work together. And you'll get a chance to see these in more detail when you take a look at it. And, you look at the importance of values to really being about how you're going to work together. So these are what we call core partnership values that we have learned at the Partnership Brokers through our almost 20 years of existence, working with partnerships around the world. What are the core principles that really help partnerships become effective? And the first is really embracing diversity, because so many people look, well, how am I going to work with those people from government if you're a nonprofit? How do you look at the fact that those people from government or from the corporate sector see things differently, but that actually will open your eyes to new ways of thinking and looking at it? So how do you embrace that diversity, because it's going to bring innovation? Equity. So I have never seen a partnership where everybody is the same size, bringing the same amount of resources. You're going to have power dynamic. So how do you talk about that and say, we're going to build equity where everybody who's at the table is there because they're bringing something of value and they would be missed. So their voice needs to be heard. That doesn't mean their voice will dominate, but nobody will dominate. Everybody will have a voice and decisions will be jointly made. Being open and honest so that you can build trust and authenticity, so that your trust, partnerships move at the speed of trust. How do you build a relationship where people can be open and honest with each other and share things, so that you're not suspicious of people, that you're really going to have trust, because those partnerships where there's trust absolutely outperform those that don't have trust. And then the mutual benefit, as I talked about, partners need to get something out of it as well as the shared goal. And you need to understand what it is that they need to get for it to be a win for them as well. And appreciate that there are good things that people want to get out of it, that are going to be helpful for them and probably helpful for the partnership. And it's so important. I always say the best partnerships are ones where everybody is working to achieve the shared goal, but to help each other achieve their goals as well. And then finally, having courage, because when you go into a partnership, the only thing that you have is uncertainty. Is it going to work? Are we going to be able to do this? Do we really have all our T's crossed and I's dotted? And at some point, your partnership will be good enough to move forward, and you have to have the courage to do it. It's the hero's journey that you're on, and that idea of really embracing, going beyond what you're comfortable. A partnership is about moving beyond your comfort zone, and that's what a hero does, move outside of their comfort zone to try to learn and do new things, and then bring back those learnings because they've really been able to make a difference by having that courage. So these are just diversity. Embracing diversity brings value, equity, power balance, brings respect, the openness, the trust, the authenticity, mutual benefit, mutuality, commitment, courage. That is what is going to give different and breakthrough results that you would never be able to achieve on your own. So I'm just going to actually briefly mention this. I talked a bit about this in terms of when you're defining your partnership, as you're thinking about it, what do you want that to be? What are the values, both those universal or those core plus the values? And then how are you going to bring those to life? And then I'm going to introduce you to the partnership cycle, which, as I mentioned, if for people who are familiar with the project cycle, you can see there's a lot of similarity to it. But in a genuine ongoing partnership, something more is required than just focusing on the project. You also have to give attention to the evolving needs of the partner and to optimize the partnership as you work together. And a strong partnership respects individual interests, where commitments and individual interests are understood. You're really working to try to do a new way of working. This isn't just patching on the old way of working. This is a new way of working. And to really be able to use this to help you understand how to do that. And you'll notice in this that there's 4 sort of key phases, and this looks all nice and neat and tidy, but it is absolutely not neat and tidy, because sometimes you get started, you realize you've missed something and you have to go back. Maybe you need to add another partner. Maybe a partner decides they're going to leave. But this scoping and building phase, which I'm going to spend a little bit more time on, is the most important. And when I often work with partners, they often say to me, well, we just start with, okay, let's get started on the project. How are we going to deliver the project results? Rather than taking the time to understand, what are we trying to do? Have we got our inside onside? What are the options? Who might be potential partners? Have we thought of everybody? And I've had experiences where we've had people who want to be partners, but they want to be partners because they want money, not because they actually are as committed to the common goal and really are bringing something of value. And in this scoping and building phase, this is the opportunity to get to know each other better and to map out and plan what you're going to do, and then decide, yes, it makes sense to partner. And then having, an agreement where it lays out how you're going to make decisions, what are the activities, how you're going to have mutual accountability, and then constantly taking time to stop and pause and say, how are we doing? Are we getting results? How is our relationship? And then realizing that partnerships don't last forever. There is a time, and I often say to partners, in your agreement, put 5 years down and stop after 5 years. I also recommend at the end of every year to pause and say, what's working, what's not working. And then at times, a partnership will come to an end and you can celebrate, you can share the knowledge. Or maybe you decide that this is a chance for you to take it to the next level, and you're going to do a 2.0 version of the partnership. So having this structure and framework really gives you a structure to think about how to work together. So I'm going to just pause here, Leslie and Carmen, and see if there's any questions or chats that you might like to share.
Yeah, thank you, Jocelyne. It's Leslie here.
Thank you.
I've got a few questions. I'll start with this one. How can you work in partnership with organizations that have different goals and missions?
Yes, And that's where this scoping and building is so important. And just because people want to be a partners doesn't mean that it's going to work. That's why it's so important to stop and take the time and say, okay. And I always think of a Venn diagram where you might have 3 circles, or you could have 4. And every partner is going to have their own other goals and objectives. But in the middle of that Venn diagram are going to be some shared opportunities to work together where there are aligned goals. They might not be perfect, but they're aligned enough that it's worth working together. So think of that Venn diagram and realize that this doesn't mean that your other partner is going to stop doing their other work.
Excellent. That's very helpful. Another question on how you would approach partnership that may involve some racial diversity, and how do you effectively go about that?
Well, it's interesting. We've just created in the Partnership Brokers Association a committee, and we're looking at how we integrate anti-racism and, racial diversity, and just, we really encourage diversity. And I think the biggest thing is being open and honest with each other, not putting those hard to discuss things on the table, having dialogues about them, being honest, having the courage to bring them forward and not just hide them. And understand that nobody has the answers to that. We're all learning. Just like we are with, we started off with our Indigenous land recognition. We are all on a journey on that bringing Indigenous communities back in and working more effectively with them. So not expecting to be perfect, and seeing challenges and things that maybe don't work as learning opportunities to take the time and say, this worked well, this didn't work, what can we do differently? And not expect to be perfect.
Excellent. The final question that I would like to pose, and I think this is where you talked about, we used the word partnership in a lot of different ways. So this is there a difference between terms partnerships, collaboration, and collective impact?
Yeah. So I think it's and of course, collective impact is something a lot of people know. They've laid it out with sort of 5 simple things you need to do. And we just see it as a lot more complicated and complex. And I think it really needs to be fit for purpose. So, collaboration, network. I'm working right now with a network where they're going to be knowledge partners, but they're working kind of individually, but they're trying to look at how do they work collaboratively as well. So I think then the language doesn't matter so much as the intent, and spending time defining what it is. Okay, if it's going to be a collaboration, what do we mean by that? What do we want to be? What's our identity going to be? What are the principles that are going to drive us? How are we going to plan? What are we going to do together? So I think, language is important, but then really defining what that language is.
Thank you, Jocelyne. I will let you continue on. I think I've got my answers.
Okay, terrific. And we'll leave some time, hopefully, at the end. So I just wanted to go in a little bit more detail about one of these areas. As I say, this is like an hour and a half, quick overview of some essential things to think about in your partnership. So there's a lot more depth behind all of this. But, really trying to, as I talked about, taking the time to scope, what is your vision? How are you going to work together? Understand what the partners need. Taking the time to understand, why do you want a partner? What is your driver? What are your interests? We have these shared interests. We've scoped this common vision. But what's driving you? What are the risks you might see? What are the rewards? What are your expectations? What are your constraints? So you try to actually think about those things before you even get into the messiness of actually starting to work together. thinking about the principles. There's those kind of core ones I presented, but what might be unique to your organizational, your partnership that is important? And then really take the time to say, let's make sure we're concentrating on the partnership as well as the project and the project work. Map the resources that everybody's going to bring. And, you know, people often forget to do that, but then you leave value on the table, because when you understand everything that people can bring, and that's not just money, knowledge, context, experience, programs, then you can leverage that and build a better plan. And then really take the time to write down the agreement so that you've got clarity around what you're going to do, what everyone needs, what roles and responsibilities, how decisions are going to be made. So there's important discussions that are had before you actually get into the heavy lifting of doing the work together, starting the project. So this is just again a simple sort of slide to kind of give you a little bit of structure that, again, I hope will help you come Monday morning. You know, I always say a partnership starts from the inside out. And it starts, have you got the inside on side? Have you got clarity within your organization around what you want the partnership to do, how you will show up as a partner, what you need to get out of it, what you would like to see as the common goal, so that you've got clarity around that as an organization. And then you can start coming together and thinking about, well, who could we partner with? Where are there shared opportunities? What are the values? Where are their value alignments? And this is where, you know, having those honest, tough discussions are so important. What do individual organizations need? Is that compatible enough with what we need to achieve? Are the constraints clear, and are those constraints too challenging? What resources? What are the programs? What are the activities? What are the things that we'll do? Who's going to do what? What does success look like for both the project, but also the partnership? And as I shared in that early slide, when you think about the outcomes, the value add of partnering, you could also have those as some of the successes. We want to have more credibility. We want to learn more. We want to build skills inside our organization and be intentional about getting value beyond just the project outcomes. And that can be really powerful. And then how are you going to evaluate not just the project outcomes, but how the partnership is doing? And I've got a tool to share that. And then you get to the point, are we committed enough? Is there enough commitment? Do we feel confident enough? And I've never seen one where every T is crossed and I's dotted and everybody's saying, we've got everything figured out, but there's enough agreement that you can get started. You can start that journey knowing that you are going to have challenges. And I think the sooner that people understand that there will be challenges, and that's actually an opportunity to get better, the better, because so many people meet challenges, they throw up their hands and they give up. So that's just going to be part of the whole partnering process. So I'll just pause again here just to get any feedback on this initial sort of phase of the partnership cycle and the partnership journey, and just see if this resonates with people. Any questions or comments in terms of your experiences?
Leslie here again, and we'll wait to see if people have some comments to your question there. But Vincent asks, how do you empower members of your organization to seek partnerships?
Yes. Well, I think that starts with leadership and your organizational strategy, where you make the decision that you are going to be a collaborative organization and you're going to seek collaborations where to help advance your goals and to advance work in the community. And then really taking the time, as I said, to, as an organization, understand what that means for you and what you're going to do and how you're going to show up if you're going to be partners, how that's going to look for you. And then where you see there could be opportunities to collaborate. and then start to think about who could be, and start to have some discussions. These things don't happen overnight.
So how do you decide, and this is a question from Linda, how do you actually find the partners? So you identify the need, but how do you actually find them?
And that is such a good question, because so often we've got, how many, we've got, I think it's 8,000 nonprofits in Alberta, 4,000 I think in Calgary. I don't know if that's the exact number, but there's a lot, and we often work in silos, so we don't often know who else is out there. So part of it is going with an open mind, and talking to people, getting outside of your comfort zone of your own organization. And this is where the boards also can be helpful. Who else do they know that might be working in this space? And I look at a really great example here in Calgary where I think it was the Alzheimer's organizations. I think it's 18 or 20 organizations that somehow are involved in Alzheimer's. And they brought them all together to kind of have this dialogue about how could we work better together, not just to achieve our goals, but to make this better for our clients. And it was interesting. I did some work with the Royal Bank of Canada, and they took on the goal of mental health for youth. This was about 7 or 8 years ago. And they did a review after to find out, well, how did we do? They provided support for a whole range of individual organizations that were serving youth with mental health issues. And what they found was it was so confusing for the client. So they became focused less on supporting the nonprofits and trying to better understand what do the clients need. And then how do we support organizations either coming together, or we really look at, we're going to double down on a certain area of mental health. So part of it is having the courage to bring others together, having open, honest dialogues, really being prepared to go on that hero's journey that goes beyond your comfort zone.
Thank you, Jocelyne. I'll leave it at that so you can carry on with your presentation.
Okay, great. Thank you. So this I guess is, maybe we can just have a little bit of a discussion, and just thinking about what you've seen in terms of the partnering cycle. I'd love to hear in the chat box how you see this cycle being something that could be useful for your organization. I'd love to just hear if this is something that you feel would be helpful, and that you could take it and use it tomorrow or next week.
It's Leslie here. I have seen a couple of comments.
Right.
And one of them says, I found that when we have partners and they want to help us by volunteering for the programs, we let them know that there are things in place for your not-for-profit for protection of all. For example, this thing is scrolling on me. Clearance working before working with children. It's appreciated. Yeah. To look at whether others have in place. So I guess partnering on that. Sorry.
Yeah, some of
the other stuff. Good.
Yeah, no worries. Some of the other stuff, feedback that we're getting, Jocelyne, is that it's creating buy-in to have everyone's input, and it enhances communication. And I think for another participant, they're saying it's really helpful with the intentionality of the partnerships.
Yeah.
And Charlene has noted that they have several inactive partners, and so this is helping to kind of make the board aware that the partnerships need to be refreshed in some way or kind of looked at again. So sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that last comment, Carmen. Sorry I didn't mean to cut you off there. You know, I think it's really important to pause and review your partnerships regularly. And there are some partnerships where the partners have gotten out of it what they need to get out of it. And rather than letting it die a slow death, you know, pausing and saying we've come to a point where, you know, we either refresh the partnership or we celebrate what we've achieved. And we stop and we take the time to say, what have we learned? You know, what could we do? What are we doing differently? And let's celebrate that. Rather than, I have seen so many partnerships die a slow death, people just stop coming. And then all of that great work gets lost. So it's so important to, I'll just go back here to the cycle and not forget to, you know, when you're delivering the projects, to make sure you've got some wins, and then stop and reviewing and being prepared to end a partnership. Lots of people say partnerships are like marriage, but I would disagree with that, because partnerships are not meant to last forever. If they are lasting forever, maybe your organizations need to merge. But if you've got, you've achieved your shared goals, it's great to say, let's just celebrate and share our learning and what we've done.
Thanks, Jocelyne. I think there's some other comments here around to your question about that this is really helpful to help organizations focus on the purpose outside of just the projects. And so they're in the scoping, they're scoping stuff right now. So thanks for the timeliness, they said. And the templates, because a lot of people are on the line are volunteers, that you know, there's a lot of volunteer work to do. So the templates are really helpful to be able to, and any more templates that you have to offer would be helpful to help them with their first draft of putting some of these plans in place.
Yes.
I think the framework has helped, saying they're very valuable. It's helping to keep partners on track. And it just, so people are recognizing that, I mean, partnerships are valuable, and there's a lot of work to do to start partnerships. So intentionality, project management, long-term relationship building. So it's definitely not something that's intentional inside of the organization, because you have to put resources towards the partnership.
Yeah, and I have a colleague who says to me, you know, partnerships are 1 + 1 = 5 in terms of the potential results. And she says it's also 5 times the work. And that's why partnerships aren't always the answer. They can be very effective, but you want to be intentional about what they are, and then how you're going to work with others. And I'm just going to go back to a bit of an earlier comment that you made about bringing on volunteers. And so, you know, part of a partnership is, one of the things is that you're going to have people coming and going. I mean, I've never seen a partnership where, you know, the people who started it are going to be the people who are there at the end. And so the onboarding partnerships, onboarding new people is really, really important. So, you know, having and being able to explain your processes and structures and what's being agreed upon, that doesn't mean they don't have a voice at some point if they're a partner. But, you know, you don't want to throw out everything and start all over just because you've got new people coming in. So keeping notes, you know, having binders of decisions, you know, having a clear process for onboarding new partners is really important.
Great. I think we can probably move on. There's lots of good comments here we'll save for you.
Okay, that sounds great. So I want to just end with the last kind of big idea that I wanted to share with you. And this is a compass that I actually created to try to help. I think there's no roadmap for you. You've got the partnership cycle, but there's so much more depth behind that than just following the partnership cycle. That working with a couple of my Canadian colleagues, we created this compass to really help be sort of points of thinking. Where are we? What do we need to be thinking about? And so when you look at the North Star, of your partnership, it starts with mindset. You know, have you got a collaborative mindset? Are you actually really have this commitment to have a culture of partnership that isn't about your organization, it's about the partnership. Your organization is part of that. That really then determines how you're going to work together. So it starts with intentionality. We talked about you spending time thinking about what your organization wants to get out of the partnership, how you as an organization are going to show up, what your mindset is going to be, and how you co-create with your partners the culture you're going to have, and paying attention, a mindset that pays attention to the partnership. If you do not have that in place, none of the tools, none of the ideas will work. So it starts with that. And then having as your South Star leadership, you know, someone who's really leading and modeling that behavior. So there's a whole new set of collaborative leadership skills that is a whole course on its own, but just to pull attention to it. And I'll share with you the next slide, which then looks at, you know, leadership that's open, that's courageous, that pushes boundaries, that sees, you know, opportunities where to learn, doesn't see challenges as failures, but opportunities to learn. And then the kind of skill sets that you need, those soft skills that everybody actually, I always say the soft skills are the hard skills. Those ones that look at listening, empathy, consensus building, facilitating discussion, being able to connect the dots, seeing where partners can come together, seeing those resources that each partners are going to be able to bring so that you can bring it to the bigger picture. Having reflection skills, taking the time to pause and think. And then tool sets. So things like the partnership cycle, even this partnership compass, I'll share some questions for you to have. And then remembering that, you know, the tool sets are actually almost the least important, because those could be co-created, some frameworks, some processes that will be helpful for you to negotiate, for you facilitating meetings, for you making sure that everybody gets heard, that you're bringing to life those really important values, those core values that are the sort of elements that are part of the compass. Equity, making sure everybody's got a voice and there isn't a power dynamic. Openness, that people are sharing and there's trust being built. Mutuality, everybody's getting something out of it at the same time you're really advancing the common goal. And embracing diversity, you know, seeing the value of different perspectives, different ways of looking at things, and being prepared to work through the messiness and the challenge. You know, we look a lot about, you know, the messy middle. You often start and everybody's excited and everybody wants it to work. And then as you start working through what this could look like and creating your plan, that's when the messiness starts. And you get into that, the messy middle. And part of it is sticking with it and getting to the other side of the messy middle. And that messy middle is where you're going to get all sorts of new ideas and innovation and create the relationships that's going to give you the chance to move your partnership forward for really great results. So this is just, and you'll see this in the slides, these are just some questions to think about as you're working through your work together. Do we have the mindset? Have we really understood the benefits and the costs? Are we aware of the fact that we've got to set up a separate process for managing our partnership? Have we really created a culture of collaboration that's moving beyond just business as usual? So these are just some questions you can use as you're getting started. This is something I also encourage partners to use even quarterly. You know, send these out and just kind of get people on a scale of 1 to 5. How are we doing? And to be able to tease out, you can do this anonymously and tease out what's working, what's not working, where you maybe need to spend some more time so that your partnership will get stronger. And as you grow and learn together, it can be remarkable what comes out of a successful partnership. So partnerships, as I say, are part art, part science. They are a group activity that achieves success through individual effort. Everybody has to show up with this partnership mindset, a focus on the project and the partnership. And we have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable when we're working in them. And they can be highly rewarding, but they absolutely will take more time and effort. But really, can we be more ambitious, lean into that human ingenuity and the common commitment we all have to making our communities better? And the biggest thing is partnerships are not a flavor of the month. They are here to stay. And I think with the pandemic, they're not going to lose popularity. They're going to become more popular. But I think the big thing is to remember, how do we raise the bar on partnering? How do we get better at it so that they don't just become patched on with the word partnership, but they're not really achieving the goals that they can if they're genuine partnerships, where we are more ambitious, where we're willing to kind of lean into that diversity, lean into the challenge, because the collaborative future is really going to be essential, not just in our communities, but around the world if we're going to create a sustainable, just, and inclusive society for all of us. It is the only way forward. And we can play an important role as individual organizations in the work we do. And then we can really elevate that by thinking about intentionally working carefully and effectively with others. So in summary, really our ability to partner effectively absolutely affects the results of the work and the project. It increases the breadth of ideas. It improves the time it takes and the energy that we need to get there if we really become more intentional. And there is no question, and people say to me, well, how do I know if partnering makes sense? And this to me is my simple answer, and I love this slide, because it's, if you want to go fast, just do it on your own. If you know what you need to do and it's easier just to do it on your own, just do it on your own. Everything doesn't need to be a partnership. And that's almost the first question you need to ask. Can we do this more effectively on our own? But if you want to go far, if you want to have those bigger results, then partnership is an important vehicle. And it is only a means to an end. It is not an end game. It is an important method that I think we all can benefit from, and doing in a more ambitious and leaning into more innovation and being stronger in terms of heroes. So I hope these 3 ideas are ones that you can take back and really apply to your current partnerships, to new partnerships. And I'm just going to share, we have these partnership broker courses that we offer in person, which we've put on hold for a while. And we've created a virtual course that's 4 weeks long that we offer online. We have one that starts this Tuesday that's filled up. We've got 30 people. We maximum is 30. And we have an hour-and-a-half webinars where we really go deep, much deeper. We put people into learning groups so that you get a chance to meet with other people. And the last one that we did, we have people from right across North America down into the US as well as Canada. We had people from Vancouver, Toronto, Calgary, Edmonton, Washington. This course that we're teaching, we have somebody from Peru. So it gives you a chance to learn from others. And then we have a handbook. We have a lot more material. We have an online course sharing forum where people can go and share ideas. And our commitment really as a global nonprofit is to really elevate the work and support organizations in doing this more effectively. So if you're interested, we've put this up. on eventbrite.ca, Brokering Better Partnerships. The registration does not open until the end of November, but you can sign on and get a reminder. We keep the cost very reasonable. It's $350 or $250 if you come with a partner or a colleague, because we really encourage several people to come and have a chance to learn so that you get shared language and shared understanding. So I think we've got about 8 or 9 minutes, Carmen and Leslie, for further questions or comments, and I'd really love to hear from the audience.
Thank you, Jocelyne. Oh, go ahead, Carmen, you go first.
That's okay. I just wanted to share some of the comments here.
Wonderful.
Just some of the learnings, because we all for Leadership Calgary, we always ask kind of at the end to our participants, how is this going to change what you do? What are you going to start doing now from what you've learned at these sessions? And so Philippe has said to us, it'll help us to be more intentional and targeted in the identification of a potential partner, which can then help around determining how they allocate resources to manage the partnership. So that's just one of the learnings that's come out.
Great.
And another of the learnings was just around, encouraging individuals to share is one of the hardest part of leading. And so building that level of trust for members and partners to really share, to become true partners, it can be really challenging. And so we're working to figure out ways to get the level. Another from Matt was saying, the challenge is to get the level of honesty from individuals about their comfort to engage as partners. So it's interesting that there's some great frameworks, and we recognize that partnerships take time.
Yeah. And this is a very sort of essentials, like we've spent an hour and a half. There's so much more depth behind it, but there's lots of great books. I mean, you talked about the trust. There's a wonderful book by Stephen Covey Jr. Called The Speed of Trust, which I've actually written a blog on my website, which you'll see in the slides. You can go and take a look at that. So how do you build that trust? And a lot of it is being willing to be vulnerable, being willing to be open, being willing to not know, and being able to ask, and having the courage to go on that hero's journey.
Leslie, do you have some questions that you wanted to put to Jocelyne?
I do, and I'm going to kind of put them into 2 categories. The first one is kind of refocusing on the audience, most of them very small volunteer-run organizations. Yeah. And so, taking this information, which has been excellent, what do you recommend to help move things forward? And it's not about disinterest or lack of buy-in, but it's rather about we're already operating at capacity or through volunteers only. So how do we get going and to start the partnerships and then maintain them, because they are time intensive?
And that is such an excellent question. And my advice is you start with one. You choose one partnership. And when I taught this course, I had somebody from the State Department in the US take it. And at the end of our 4-day course we were asking people what they were taking back. And she said, I just did my evaluation with my boss, and my goal was to create 25 new partnerships. I'm going back to tell them I'm going to create 2. So don't try to boil the ocean. Not everything needs to be a partnership. Be intentional. Choose one that you could try and learn and get better at.
Excellent. My next question, we have 3 kind of that relate to funding. Funding is always the challenge. And so in partnership, there's kind of 3 buckets that I'll put the funding into that are problematic. The first one is what I'll call territorialism. We're not wanting necessarily to kind of reveal our funding sources or to partner because we're afraid we might lose it. The second, and these all relate to three different questions, is we're trying to do something that's very risky. And if we haven't done it before, funders may not trust to give a partnership that initial funding. And then the final one is, you know, what's the difference between fundraising and partnership development? You know, oftentimes we try and partner to leverage dollars. So this is really about the funding question.
Yeah.
And those three scenarios.
And it's such an important question because this is often, you know, I was involved in a partnership where we had $3 million, and that was the biggest question. The biggest challenge was figuring out how we were going to allocate that. So, you know, so that everybody felt that it was fair to their organization and fair to what the partners were trying to achieve together. And there was you know, that was a great discussion that helped us build some trust for sure. But I have to say, one of the things that I recommend is that you go in as partners to apply for the funding together. And I just was, this Calgary Chamber of Voluntary Organizations just did a nonprofits at 2, where they brought funders on to sort of talk about what's happening with the funding world in this pandemic. And they all basically agreed they're going to be lucky if they had the same amount of money. It's going to be more likely they won't. And that in fact, they're going to look more favorably on collaborative applications where it is groups working together. So if you decide what you're going to do and then apply for the funding, and you know, somebody, so that it doesn't become territorial. And it's a hard thing for nonprofits to get over. I think that's one of the biggest challenges, is that we've been taught to not share and be so careful because we have this scarcity mindset. There's not enough out there. If we look and say that actually there is enough out there, we just have to think differently about how we look at resources and how we go about it. That's a mindset shift, and that's not easy. I'm not saying any of this is easy, but it's, you know, and to the question about risky, you know, I think again, the planning, that's where the planning is so important, so that I think there are funders, private foundations often are willing to take on risk if they feel there's going to be a reward. And certainly if they see, again, that this isn't just one organization, this is a collective of organizations who have come together and are jointly applying for funding. And certainly here in our city, I know there are organizations who they're shifting a third of their funding specifically for partnerships. They're looking to move beyond single organizations and single programs. And many partnerships get started because they were forced marriages. You know, partners said, we'll fund you, but you got to find partners. And they became sort of shotgun weddings and often didn't work. So what we're trying to do is say, be proactive. You know, funders are seeing this as the way forward. So be proactive. And then the difference, sorry.
No, that's wonderful. I note that we're almost out of time
here. Yes, and I don't want, yes, it's noon, yes.
You know, we all have more questions, and that's what Follow-Up Friday's for. I'm going to invite Carmen back to do a close, and this has been amazing.
Okay, thanks so much, Leslie.
Jocelyne, thank you so much today for your presentation. You provided us with so many good concepts and insights and examples for our group to consider as they move forward in creating partnerships, reviewing partnerships, and evolving their partnerships, I think. So thanks so much again for taking your time to share your knowledge and your insights. We really, really appreciate it. For our participants, as we've mentioned in the chat, the slides will be available on Board Leadership Calgary's website in a few days, so you can check back there. We will have an evaluation shortly, and that's really helpful for Board Leadership Calgary and for our speakers to know how we're doing in terms of, are we meeting your needs? So when this webinar ends, there'll be a link to an evaluation that will pop up in your browser, so please take some time to fill it out. There'll also be a link sent to your email, and the information really helps us to plan future events. The next thing I wanted to mention was Follow-Up Fridays. So our Follow-Up Friday is next Friday at noon. If you're registered for it, you will receive an email shortly that will allow you to submit questions for the session. It's actually currently full, so if you don't think you can make it, please cancel your order so that others can attend. We would really appreciate that. And then finally, our next webinar series is Saturday, November 21st at 10:30, and a hot topic as well, cash flow management in times of uncertainty. So that will be also a great session, and you can register at the link shown on the screen. So that's all that I wanted to say today. Thanks so much again, Jocelyne, for speaking with us today. We really appreciate it. And we all hope you have a great afternoon.
Thanks so much for inviting me, Carmen. And I really enjoyed the opportunity to share this information.
Yeah, I think we have lots to take away and to think about. So that's great. And we'll, like I said, we can continue this conversation next Friday. So thanks everybody for attending today.